Hello, hello, hello. This is Sooty Will here for the commentary of Henry's Hoax, episode 2 of my Thomas series. So last time we talked for a long time about the eyesight test, and I had to go over how I made all the backdrops, how I edited the intro sequence and the credits and all that. But since we're on episode 2, I don't think this one will take as long. But still, there are lots of little Easter eggs and little stories behind how this episode came to be. So let's get right into it. So once again, the intro sequence here is pretty similar to the eyesight test. It mostly has some stock footage I filmed on a whole bunch of sets. It has a bunch of clips from future episodes that I have yet to finish. And of course the same little intro and outro clip with Thomas right here. So originally, Henry's Hoax was meant to be the first episode of my Thomas series, to kind of start it off with sort of a slower paced episode. But then I later decided that it would be much better to start my series with a more exciting episode with a big crash, or two crashes almost. And so I switched them around and made this episode 2. So much like the eyesight test, Henry's Hoax is also based on a story from Thomas Wikia. However, this one is more closely based, I would say, on the Wikia's description, because they also had some images as well that helped me understand what the magazine story was originally about. And once again, like the eyesight test, I used a quote from one of the engines that was listed at the top of the article. And I overall just thought it was a really good Henry story, kind of a Boy Who Cried Wolf kind of story. And it is a lot simpler and slower paced. It's more character based than, a big journey or a big crash or anything. But I will say that my future episodes will have a lot more action and a lot more comedy in them. This was kind of a simpler story to dip my feet in the water, so to speak. It was also one of the first episodes I filmed. In fact, this was actually the first set I ever built back in, I think, July 2019. And I filmed other scenes on it for Water Troughs and Scottish Twins too. And many others are going to show up in this yard too. I called it Tidmouth Yard, I think it was. And it was built on my large table. It was probably the biggest, one of the biggest sets too, aside from maybe Tidmouth Sheds that I built just recently. But yeah, and so this was my first attempt ever. So these shots with Percy and Henry here are some of the first shots I ever filmed for my series. And that's also why this shot with Percy approaching here took so many takes, because I once again had no idea what focal length was and what it meant. So I have many bloopers of just me trying to focus the camera as Percy was running. And the Bachman Percy is also notoriously a bad runner, so that was also tricky. And I also I hadn't had a lot of practice with sticking little faces on the engines. So this shot here, I wanted it to look really good, and I think it turned out okay in the end, but it took a lot of tries, and eventually I just had to settle for one of them. So this whole intro sequence here with Percy and Henry, once again kind of based on the images on the Wikia. I didn't follow them too closely, but I got some general inspiration from the Wikia's images. Special thanks to whoever posted them. I'll put their name on screen right now. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of steam effects from Percy's cylinders. That was added back in 2019, actually, in Filmora 8 or 9, I think. So they had very primitive effects back then, but I still put them in anyway. So I tried to give my engines kind of different voices throughout my series. So Henry's voice is kind of he kind of sounds all stuffed up and more British and whatever. Percy and Thomas's voices are pretty much just my normal voice. Gordon, whenever I get to him, will be, Gordon talks like this, oh, the indignity. And James is James is James, so he's shouts a bit more honestly now, which sounds better? I'm a splendid red engine, na-na-na-na-na, And of course, the Fat Controller voice is just my DVD menu, click on Thomas again voice. I also tried to give the driver and fireman different voices too, more, I guess, nauseating voices, the mechanic later on is well, Henry, there seems to be nothing wrong with you now. I tried to give them all, not Michael Brandon level voices, but different enough in between the different characters, kind of like George Carlin or Alec Baldwin used to do. Now, if you look in this wide shot of Henry here, you'll notice in the background there's George the Steamroller. In the background, there's also Fred from the Cars movies, a die cast of him, and also the forklift Chuck, also from the first Cars movie. And on the right side, you'll also see a little 10 miles per hour marking sign. That is the exact same sign I used back in my Rabbits episode that I made in 2017 or something. I still have that stupid sign, and I use it all the time for some reason. I even put it in my Tidmouth Shed set. Kind of a little nod to one of my first attempts at filming a Thomas story. I'm not terribly proud of that Rabbits episode, but I'm gonna keep it up on YouTube anyway, just because. And in this shot here, I also used one of my favorite music cues, the little kind of flute sound effect that Mavis M composed. I really like that sound effect a lot. And of course, I also wanted to have engines like Duck and the Scottish Twins passing by in the background, just to show that, the art is still a busy place. All right, moving along. This little scene here is pretty simple. I had some improv here of Henry coughing. Cough, cough, wheeze. I thought was pretty funny. Not much to say about this bit. There's some excellent music cues by Angry Bird Fan 98. And next we have the shot of Henry and Percy leaving the yards here. So Henry's tender actually derails right there. I showed it in the bloopers. It actually just comes off the track entirely. I don't know why I didn't just refilm it. Anyway, this is actually the second set I ever built, this little countryside set with Caroline in the background. The Bachmann windmill, of course. And I didn't actually notice this until I was taking notes on what I wanted to talk about in this commentary, and I didn't notice, but there's a fox figure beside the windmill hiding behind the trees in the background. I totally forgot that was even there. And it appears to be a rather gigantic fox, but he's there. I also think I hid a little figure of Mr. Big from Zootopia in the set somewhere. I think in the shot of Gordon and Thomas for my later episode, I think I hid Mr. Big in there somewhere too. Next we have the engine works at Crovan's Gate. This little sign here I thought was nice. And then Crovan's Gate has probably the most Easter eggs out of all my 2 episodes so far. Of course, you've got Mater hiding in the background, and beside him is another Cars truck there. His name is Gil, I think. There's a Take Along Diesel 10 without a claw in the background. Some Rusty's crates from Cars, and I think later there's an all-in-all barrel. If you'll notice here, I also just reused the Farquhar sheds off to one side. And that little Lego house there. So back when I was 7 or 8 years old, I built this little Lego shed for wooden railway engines, and I called it the Steamworks. So I kind of thought it'd be nice to have a little nod to my old, Thomas stories and my old Thomas creations by hiding that in there, because it's been built for 10 years or something. It's kind of ridiculous, but that's my little Lego Steamworks there. Now, the reason why I edited in some wooden railway engines here is because I don't have them in Bachmann, and my characters are pretty limited. So I included Daisy, of course, because she's always, at the works complaining about something. And of course I put Derek there as well because of his teething troubles. And there's the wooden railway ambulance there too, which I thought would be a nice touch. But pretty simple sets. Just the same buildings, the signal box, the warehouse, the sawmill building, just the same sets used over and over again. And I'm also just noticing now, I put a little piece of wood beside the rails because I didn't feel like laying down the ballast for this one tiny shot. Back in 2019, I was a lot more lazy, I think. I really cut a few corners, whereas nowadays I'll spend an hour building a set for just one 3-second shot for some reason. It's kind of a waste of time sometimes, but oh well. Moving right along, we have the next scene. In the background of this shot, there is some all-in-all barrels from Cars 2 sets. In the background, there's the 440 General engine, which I may or may not use in some future videos. We'll have to wait and see. And of course, Henry's like, oh, I'm feeling much better now, which I thought would be a lot funnier. And once again, I re-recorded this episode in 2021 just to, make it a lot funnier and just add a bit more improv. I had to re-edit the workman shot in January because I actually made him facing the wrong direction back in 2019. And I don't know if anyone noticed this, but in the background of my shots, I like to have little sound effects of engines or vehicles going by. So in this shot, you'll hear George the Steamrollers going by with his whistle. I think Hero passes by. Even if the whistle sound effects make no sense, I like having them. I put Lady's whistle in Green Grocery Engine and a whole bunch of other just random whistles. Now, this line here, when Henry says, "So I guess we're done?" That's actually a reference to Zootopia when Nick says the same thing when they get caught in Mr. Big's limo, actually. I'll put a clip on screen now.
Now, since you're sans warrant,
I guess we're done? So that's my mandatory Zootopia reference in this episode, is that one line. Now, for Henry's checkup, I actually took a whole lot of alternate shots that weren't seen. And I'll be honest, the giant Lego props like the ladder and the toolbox are ridiculously out of scale, but I don't really mind it. It still gets the point across that, you know what they're supposed to be, even if they're, absolutely humongous. So the Fat Controller shows up here. I thought it'd be kind of funny if it had a little winking sound effect here, once again by Angry Bird Fan. I don't know when that little sound effect showed up in Season 1, but I thought it was cute. The little dream sequence, I guess, of Henry becoming a hen house was one of the last shots I filmed for the whole episode. It was also one of the most fun ones because I got to just cover the Bachman Henry in like straw and wood and little shrubbery. And then, of course, I added in the chickens in post-production. And, there's one coming out of his funnel, just to be silly. Oh, and in this fantasy sequence here, the little hay bale off to one side, it was based on a tutorial I saw on how to make a little miniature hay bales. So I'll put the link in the description and the video on screen because it's a really good tutorial, and I made, I think, 2 or 3 really nice hay bales that I can use in the background of my sets. And once again, I replaced the Fat Controller shots with ones from the show instead of the Ertl ones. Oh, and there's also a reference to something in the air when the Fat Controller says, "You should know that by now," because he also says the same thing in when Henry crashes with the flying kipper in that episode. And the next day, we went back to the same yard that we started out, kind of like in the eyesight test. I started and ended the episode in the same location. There's a little plastic Zootopia car in the background there, behind the signal box. And then for this final shot here, this was actually a split screen shot because it was really difficult to get my engines to move at the same speed. I knew I'd never be able to make Henry, who is an absolute unit of a Bachmann engine, and Percy, who sometimes doesn't run very well, to go at the exact same speed for this ending shot. So if you look closely, it's actually just split down the middle. So I filmed Henry puffing away, and then I plugged in the controller into the opposite track and filmed Percy, and then I just spliced them over each other. And in this shot, there's, of course, the Wooden Railway Butch and a diecast of Lizzie from Cars. There's actually a lot of Cars Easter eggs in this one, now that I think about it. And that pretty much wraps up Henry's Hoax. Once again, I didn't have a lot to say about this one, at least not compared to the eyesight test. Special thanks to all the music creators, as always. They always did an excellent job. And special thanks to GW Shunter for the Thomas sound effects, and Thomas HD Classics for the Thomas faces and footage. Special thanks to the Tinkercad user, once again, for the miniature Fat Controller figure. And a special thanks to my little brother for painting it as well. And special thanks to you for watching. So once again, I hope, let's see, I've been talking for 17 minutes. Okay, not as long as last time, but still, I cut down the last one from 25 minutes down to 20 minutes. So still, that's still a while to talk about a Thomas episode. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the second commentary. I really enjoy making them. There will definitely be a director's commentary for Back to the Drawing Board as well. I'm still trying to get a move on with some other projects. I'm trying to balance my Thomas, Zootopia, and Looney Tunes content. A very strange combination for a channel, but I'm trying to balance it out a bit more. But once again, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time. I really got to think of a good send-off sentence here. So bye.